Well, everyone, it's here. Our second time do- doing a Panda game holiday game review. We are doing Days Before Christmas, the Super Nintendo version. I don't even have my prop with me this time. Last time I had a prop with me. We already recorded this. Kelly said some things that morally I couldn't stand behind. And I think once he slept on it and really did some soul searching, he knew we're not appropriate. So we decided to scrap that version of the show and give you guys a whole new, fresh take on things.
Or I was an idiot and deleted the file. You can go
We'll
with,
let you guys choose
I
which
mean,
story you want to go with.
I'm kind of an idiot either way, but one way I'm a super evil idiot, the other way I'm just a lovable dumb guy. So let's go with the lovable dumb guy. But we are going to talk about it again. And it is our first Christmas video game review because they're kind of hard to find, for one thing.
Yeah, there's just not a lot. There's not a ton of holiday games, period. There is more Christmas than, say, Thanksgiving, where we had to, just for our first one, kind of stretch the definition of that because it's a turkey centric game.
Yeah, it was, man, it counts. We're good. So we'll see. And yeah, it's the other disappointing thing about losing the other version of this was that Mike just led me through the categories, had them all at the tip of his tongue. He just knew what each one was, and just kind of dragged me along through the review. And so I feel like I owe it to him to be the one to bring the categories up. It's not that he doesn't remember them. No, it's not that. It's just it's payback for the amazing job he did on the never to be seen version of our Panda review for Days Before Christmas, Super Nintendo version. Although through the process, Michael shares some differences between that and the Genesis version as well.
Yes, and it's worth noting up front that this wasn't officially released in the US when it first came out. It was released in Australia for Genesis first, then throughout Europe and Australia for the Super Nintendo, where it's ported to that. American versions were planned and just never happened, which is interesting because it seems like a very Americanized idea of Christmas to me. So I do think that that's interesting. It is available. The reason we're doing the Super Nintendo version, it seems the consensus that that's the better version. Also, though, it's the version that's included on the Sunsoft Collection Volume 2, which you can get in America now, which includes this game. So it is officially available here now, but I'll be honest with you, it was pretty widely available before, at least unofficially. ROMs of this have popped up on different things. I have seen both import and homemade cartridges of this that have popped up places as recently as honestly a few weeks ago when I was in a store and they had a reproduction cartridge of it. So it's not that this was impossible to play before then, but I do have a legitimate the Sunsoft collection cartridge of it. So we're not using ROMs here.
Yeah,
I'm not using ROMs here.
that's true. That's 100% true. So moving right along, fun factor is our first category. How do you want to do this one? Do you want me to go first this time? You go first, or what?
I think this time you should go first. I did it last time.
Oh, all right. Fun factor for this game, I'm going to go with three. I think that's kind of middle of the road. I don't dislike this game. It is enjoyable. It's fun to play. It didn't wow me beyond the fact that as we'll get to the visual appeal, graphics are pretty solid. But it's a platformer. There's not a lot of groundbreaking things. There's a few things, a few bad platformer habits this has, or at least one bad platformer, which we'll talk about in the next category or two. But overall, good gameplay. Enjoyed it. It's fun to do. Easy to sit down and spend a little bit of time on this game. So I thought well executed, but I'm kind of just going to come in with a three on that.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go three as well, just slightly above average kind of thing. this isn't a game that you're likely to play all year. It's something going to break out around Christmas, and that makes sense. It's got a shelf life. You're probably not going to spend hours and hours playing this game. So you're going to get, if you're looking for something that's Christmas fun and you can show to kids and they it's easy enough for them to pick up and play and you can have a good time, this is going to do that. Are you going to be playing this months after Christmas? Probably not. And that's what keeps it from being higher.
Yeah. And so we'll just jump right into the next category, which Mike knows is controls. And so, spoiler, we got controls, followed by difficulty. I probably kind of came into it having at a 4 for each of those. But as I reflected on it further, this game is awash with blind jumps. There's a lot of blind jumping involved with this game. And I didn't know if it was going to be appropriate to dock controls or difficulty for that. And so I decided to dock both. So for for controls, I'm going to go with a 3. It's a platformer. Controls are fine. You don't have to do some of the incredibly precise precision 6 different moves with the joystick and hitting the fire button and different types of things. You have to be quick. You've got to do some things to time jumps and all that good stuff. Deal with the blind jumps, which I know Mike's not a big fan of, nor am I. And so I kind of between the two, those I just kind of said, yeah, it feels about like a 3. Again, it's a platformer. It's solid controls for the platformer. There's really no it's easy to pick up and know what you need to do on the process. So I went with a 3 on controls.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty basic, but everything is responsive. The controls are tight enough for what they need to be. But also, I mean, because the gameplay is lacking a ton of depth, which I would argue is a lot of platformers. I'm just not a giant fan of this particular subgenre. I don't think a lot of platformers have a ton of depth to them. And again, this is something that's kind of family oriented, so it's going to cast the widest net that it possibly can. So for what it is, I'm going to go with a 3 for controls.
Yeah. Yeah, not a lot of world building going on in
No.
platformers usually. Because even a really strong platformer, I think at some point we'll review, and I think will do pretty well is Donkey Kong. And there's not much of an evolution in the there. I mean, there's the girders are in a different spot, but there's those types of things there. But it's a part of the nature of a platformer. So, as I mentioned before, difficulty is our next category. Went ultimately because of those darn blind jumps to a 3 versus a 4. And this is that, is it hitting the right balance? This is a game that you're not going to rage quit, probably. It's also not a game that you're going to finish immediately either. There is some skill involved to kind of make it through some of the levels and kind of sort out what to do when Santa turns evil on you and take the right approach on some of that, which is kind of one of the cool little effects they have going on. From a difficulty perspective, I thought, it felt about right. It's there are platformers that are just crazy difficult to do. There are platformers that are probably too simple to do. And this is it hits the middle for me. So I went with a 3.
Yeah, I'm gonna go 3 as well. We're lining up here for a lot of the same reasons. So I do think the difficulty is kind of right sized for what this is. Again, kind of a family oriented game. Maybe some parents or grandparents are jumping on who don't normally play games, and you don't want them to immediately die and lose interest. Same thing with younger kids. You want them to be able to play it a little bit so they can kind of get interested in the game and games in general. Uh, it lets you get through all of there's a bunch of levels because it's set up like an advent calendar with a level for each day, which is a nice little touch to it. The levels are very short though, and they can get repetitive. The one thing, and this goes to my general feeling about platformers, is like Kelly said, lots of blind jumps. That's something that happens in all platformers, and I don't like it because there's no skill involved in that, or even to a degree, it's not even that much memorization. It's almost luck. at a certain point, which kind of takes away the fun element for me for stuff like that. And there are more, so this is where I'll talk a little bit about the differences. There are more blind jumps in this than there are in the Genesis, the original Genesis version. That's because the Super Nintendo has a different internal resolution. The Genesis resolution matches your TV screen, Super Nintendo doesn't. There are ways that they can kind of program it so that it'll display correctly, but what happens more often than not is games are either cropped or there's like a black bar at the top or bottom of the screen to make up for the difference. So this is cropped. And because of that, some of the jumps that weren't blind jumps on Genesis are blind jumps now because of the cropped screen. So that's not great. This one is also a little bit easier in some other ways, though. So the Genesis version in the outdoor levels where you're walking on snow, you do slip on the snow. So, like if you're walking up a hill and you stop, you'll slide down the hill and things like that. That is not on the Super Nintendo version of the game. There's also a whole other enemy in the Genesis version that's missing completely from the Super Nintendo version. It's this rock monster who's still in the artwork and stuff like that, just not in the actual game. He can't kill you, he just kind of shoves you backwards, but he's missing completely from the Super Nintendo version. So in some ways it's easier, but then it balances out with more blind jumps than you had before.
Yeah, that's disappointing that you can only kind of eradicate some of those with the wider Genesis resolution, but that's the way it goes. All right, now a tricky one, replayability. As Mike mentioned, there's, within a particular level, there's not a ton of diversity. Um, I mean, it's a level, and you're making progress through it, and you've got to kind of figure out a few things and all that. So it's not bad. Because it is advent calendar based, and you got a large number of different levels, and there are certain levels that are, where you're driving the sleigh or something like that, a pretty significant difference. And so, I think that adds some diversity to it, that as you're progressing through there, even though none of the levels are long, uh, you've got a lot of variety to go to, which can add up to a lot of time too. But it may be seasonal replayability, but I'm comfortable. This is typically a game that if it doesn't have as much kind of diversity or interest to it, I might go with a two. But I just think this one here, there's enough. There's differences between the levels. There's a decent number one of them, and particularly seasonally, you could play it. So, the seasonal replayability lets me pull it up to a three. So I'm gonna go with a three for that.
Yeah, we're right on the same page here. The seasonal part's the most important for this. I've played it the past few Christmases, had a good time with it. Am I breaking this out in summer? No. But next holiday season, will I look forward to playing this again after I haven't played it for a while? Yes. So it's a little above average. Kelly loves it when we do 2.5 pandas, but it's a little above average. So I'm going to give it a three because I'll play it again next year.
I'll go to the final category, which is visual appeal. And this is bound by the platform you're on. So an Atari 2600 would never exceed a one, maybe the occasional two, if we didn't take into account the platform it's on. So we will, on these reviews, do that. And so Super Nintendo, I can talk about a Genesis angle on this if he wants to as well. I think it's a pretty good looking game. And I think the sprites are nice. They're not, they're SNES size sprites. There's a certain size that you kind of get used to and expect. Um, but they're well done. There's some cute differences between the levels. It's kind of fun. So the game looks good. And so I went with a four for visual appeal.
Yeah, this is a tough one because so everything is animated really well. Everything looks nice. It's colorful, nice looking sprites. There are some differences again to talk about between the Genesis and Super Nintendo. I would say overall the Super Nintendo version looks better despite being cropped. Super Nintendo has much wider color palette, and this really shows it off. The Genesis version, if you put the Genesis version looks really nice, but if you put them side by side, the extra colors add so much more depth to the Super Nintendo version, especially in the outdoor scenes. You have a really nice gradient effect on the sky, giving you, sunrise and sunset images for the outside things where it's just a kind of blue sky in the Genesis version, things like that. So the extra colors make a huge difference. For some reason, though, and I don't know if it was just rushing it out, the outdoor scenes are missing a lot that the Genesis version has. When you're in the sleigh, going over buildings, dropping presents down chimneys, each different country that you go to in the Genesis version has some recognizable landmark in the background. So in the London stage, for example, you fly by Big Ben. That's completely missing in the Super Nintendo version. Mount Fuji is another one. So for whatever reason, all of those stages are missing some big background element. So it's kind of a wash in that sense for me because it looks better with the colors, but you are missing stuff. But again, it's a nice looking game, so I'll give it a four.
We were right down the line there on all the same scores, which puts us both at 16. And if Mike will give me a moment to pull up my reference document, I will let us know kind of where things land. So this is our 14th game we're reviewing. Uh, and at 16 for Mike, it puts it at number 12 of the 14, um, just behind Alien Trilogy on the PlayStation, but above South Park, our other holiday review, South Park on the Nintendo 64. So
That
it's
makes sense to me. I do think it's a little better than South Park, not as good as Alien Trilogy. So that feels like a good spot.
okay. So I took a much different view on this. So of the now 14th game, I have this at 16 at my 11th place in the list, just behind Alien Trilogy and just ahead of South Park. So so kind of right there, the same thing. And our two lists look pretty close to the same, with the notable exception of Mike likes Paperboy a lot more than I do. That's
Yeah,
that's
Paperboy was the one, like most of them are within 1 or 2 points of each other, but Paperboy was the big
within one or
difference
two. The
there.
order's pretty darn close to the same, but there's it's the one we've got a difference, and it's a pretty big difference between the two, because it's up pretty very high on your list and down on the low. And it's not that I hated it; it was just kind of as we went through into these point, the can't argue with the panda. If we just threw and applied the pandas, that's where we ended up. Hey, why don't you subscribe to the Bog Panda YouTube channel, and which will serve as a regular reminder for you to come out and let us know what you think about our past game reviews, if you agree or not. If you would have been more Panda generous on any of these types of things, if your scores would be different, you can check out where we sit on those. We'd appreciate that. We have give the video a like, share it with your friends. Also, as our thank you, you can have Hard No. It's the world's shortest podcast, published daily. It's on the Bog Panda YouTube channel, as well as some micro homebrew games that come out of the fine kitchens of Bog Panda, and that will include some Game Boy games and the Slapdash family. So there's a whole variety of those. Those are seasonal. We do have both Christmas and Thanksgiving covered with that. And so you can check that out. There's also Doom levels. There's recently released a special Christmas present level, Doom level for you on there. So check that out. There's a direct download with listed within the description, as well as on our website. You'll be able to find it, and a nice listing of all the other games that are out there. and also a location where you can look at some t-shirt ideas we've come up with over the time on our shows, and maybe you want to kind of purchase one of those. So lots of things you can look at. All right, so we have done Days Before Christmas. Maybe our first and only second time recording Panda review. Was it more exciting for you this time? Did you feel?
It was. It was.
Yeah, it was. I was on pins and needles. So super interesting. Let us know what you think in the comments, folks. Appreciate it. And thanks for watching.
Thanks, everybody.
Bog Panda.